That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari.
And I'm Stacy Moore.
And this week we're going to overanalyze Logan. So in the near future, a weary Logan cares for an ailing Professor X in a hideout on the Mexican border. But Logan's attempts to hide from the world and his legacy are upended when a young mutant arrives, being pursued by dark forces. All right, the last of the Wolverine breakouts. What did you think, Stacy?
What did I think? Okay, so just to be open, there is no dimension, earthly or celestial, in which I would not like this movie.
Okay.
It's like, and I knew that going in, it's like an AI program.
Okay.
Analyzed my viewing habits.
And constructed the movie.
Right. Like exported a movie with like all the elements that Stacy Moore would love. Like there's all the Western homages. There's, the well choreographed fight scenes and action scenes. Dysfunctional family arguments in the car on a road trip. And just so many kind of delightful gems all throughout that you wouldn't normally expect to find in a comic book movie. Like, I think my favorite scene in a comic book movie ever may be Wolverine helping Professor X pee at a gas station. And so things like that. We're watching his daughter, like, launch off his back and like lacerate some poor schmuck. Like there were enough of those, or him grabbing like a couple of cigars off the counter, like just really quick. Not
or the gas station.
Exactly. Just when he finally realizes that or accepts that she's his daughter. Little things like that were just so that I just love so much. I completely forgave the fact that the movie is neck deep in cliches. Like I just didn't mind.
Okay, I will give you, so let's like lay out all our biases up front. I am not a huge superhero movie fan. I feel like they're just getting repetitive and dull, and I'm so uninterested. Listeners of this podcast know my hatred of CGI, so I'm like, don't make another Spider-Man until the technology is caught up, right? Like, it never looks realistic. I know they don't want to lose. I know the finances don't support this. I get it. But I'm just saying, like, Spider-Man looks terrible. And so, interestingly, on that front, like, the only superhero movies I've really liked have been the X-Men. So, one of the things that I've always really liked about the X-Men and the way the X-Men have been done for the most part by Fox Studios is that the X-Men, it's actually about something. I don't know what the moral universe of any of the Disney Marvel characters are. Like, if they're about something, I missed it. I mean, I feel like I've enjoyed some of the Captain America ones, but it's honestly just about being a good guy, right? And I feel like, I make this joke about the X-Men all the time, which is that I don't know if it's because I'm Jewish or if it's because I'm evil, but I'm solidly Team Magneto. This is a universe where the bad guys are compelling. They're not just evil for evil's sake. They have a legitimate point. And to that end, this movie, Magneto is right. Like,
he was right all along.
There is no Professor X harmony. Like, the humans find a way to breed out the mutants, and ultimately the mutants are destroyed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point that, like, I didn't think of it. I'm so glad you brought that up. That all that time, Professor X said, deep down, people are good, and eventually we'll be able to work this out. And like, no, Magneto was right.
And Team Magneto was always like, get them before they get us. Mm-hmm. Like, there is no peaceful coexistence. There is no two-state solution.
Right. Zero-sum game.
It is very much an allegory for, the Holocaust. But, so I thought, wow, they give you the shred of hope in the kids. But ultimately, the hopeful universe the hopeful belief about mutants is just not borne out. And I was like, wow, this is such a departure. And especially because I went back and watched the previous Wolverine movie, which was...
Which one? The
Wolverine. Yeah. I was told not to watch the first one because it was so terrible. I want to get into the whole character of Wolverine in a second. Sure. But I just will say, like, a friend of mine was like, oh, I liked it because it was low stakes. I was like, no stakes. I was like, why didn't that Japanese girl just kill herself? Because she was so annoying. So this one was really about something. So one of the things that's always puzzled me is the love for Wolverine.
Okay.
So to you, what makes him such a compelling character?
I presume that I'm broken inside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I figure that's why. Watching the very first X-Men, I felt just like Rogue. I just had, instant huge crush on that character. Mm-hmm. And I presume it's like that side of us that some of us have where we just are drawn to someone who just doesn't say a lot but seems to feel so deeply. He's tortured, he's just carrying that pain, but deep down he really does care, and eventually he can't resist a damsel in distress. So I'm not saying
unless it's his own kid.
Oh, sure.
So, one of the things I actually liked about the movie was, someone once said there were only 7 original stories and Shakespeare covered them all, right? Mm-hmm. So...
Was it Joseph Campbell?
Possibly. This is not, if a kid, an older, grumpier person who finding a child to, like, redeem their life is the least original story on the planet, right?
Right.
But he never chooses her. Like,
he never does.
Like, he never does. As long as there is Charles to save,
right?
He absolutely saves the 90-year-old man before he saves the 11-year-old little girl.
He does think about it, though. Like,
but he never chooses. I was like, I'm so glad about that. Like, I'm so glad they don't make it this like, oh, now there's a child and I'm immediately a different person kind of story.
Yeah. I mean, he'd known Charles for what? Like, I don't know, 50 years at that point. He'd known her a week.
Yeah, I thought it was realistic, but but it broke with convention a little bit for me.
Oh, as far as like other movies,
I feel like any other movie would have like had him save the little girl. Mm-hmm. But
and they do support they to your point, they certainly support that through the first half of the movie is all like you're watching what Logan has done on a day-to-day basis, as so many people do with aging parents, right? Mm-hmm. Like he's invested in Charles,
right?
Like he is in this for life as far as he knows, or at least as long as Charles will be alive. Yeah. So it's definitely consistent.
So cinematically, I would say after praising the other X-Men movies, weak villains.
In this one,
yes. Although
I really enjoyed Boyd Holbrook's performance.
I did. Have I seen him in anything before? I forgot to look.
I went back to look. The only thing I can find is in the Hatfields and McCoys that I've seen.
I have not seen that.
That was like a television, I think, miniseries or something. But no, I had to look back too because he seemed so familiar. But I really, really loved like how he played that and how he interacted with Laura. But yeah, no, as a character, he was completely. Well, I suppose he was slightly vulnerable in some places, like kind of pathetic, but for the most part, just not very.
They didn't bother giving him a personality, nor did they bother giving Richard E. Grant a personality other than him to be the kid of the other doctor. So, weak on the compelling villain front.
Definitely.
Western aspects that you felt like were done well. Go to town.
My hands
I know. Right, this is not a genre I'm a huge fan of. I'm excited.
Oh man. Okay, let's see. So from start to finish, it is beat over our heads. That they make us watch Shane, and then they quote it later,
right? And
then they end with Johnny Cash. So we're meant to look at this as a Western.
Absolutely.
It does. I think it makes sense in several ways. One, just Wolverine's character is like that stereotypical cowboy of like, he's between worlds. He doesn't belong. He makes himself obsolete by making the world safe, and then he has to go off into the wilderness because he doesn't belong in the safe society he helped create, that kind of thing.
Right. And he's, you know, he has the ends justify the means. Like, I have to be the bad guy so that none of you have to be the bad guy.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Like, he takes on that sort of dark responsibility. Yeah,
right.
That's true. In other levels, I think the movie definitely kind of brought up a lot of allusions to like the genocide of Native Americans or First Nations peoples in this country, like in the same way that, you know, the mutants are, you know, wiped out of existence, chased through the woods even. Back to the Logan character, he's almost an anti-cowboy in the sense that they line him up with Shane going into the family in Oklahoma. And he behaves like Shane and fulfills that role of protecting, you know, kind of standing up for Eric LaSalle's father, Oklahoma father, against like in the old movies, they would have been the cattle barons, the railroad barons, like intimidating the family into moving. And he stands up for them and, you know, fights the good fight. But at the end of the day, they all bite it. And it's because of him.
No, it's because of Charles. Really? You think it's because of him?
Oh, because he made them stay.
Because, and I'm like, sure. Logan's like, we should go. And Charles is like, we should stay. And I was like, you should go.
It's dramatic irony. We know they should go. Wolverine knows they should go. Everyone in the theater knows they need to be leaving. Like, we know what happens to people who help Wolverine and let him stay over as a house guest. They all die horrible deaths. Like, we all know this.
Right. And it's again the like... The sort of downfall of Professor X of like
his tragic
he's
flaw.
Just wrong.
Right.
He's wrong about people. He's wrong about the way he sees the world.
He's naive.
Like, yeah. So like to me it's ultimately Charles again, like just having this naive view of peace and love and harmony, which just never sees the darker forces at work. And I was super angry. Like, in the whole part, I was like, you're just going to get these people killed. I was mad.
Yeah, it's true. And I think you're right. And the cowboy himself, like, he's both dark and light.
Right.
And that's what Logan is that he is comfortable, you know, recognizing what's dark about the world and recognizing that, like, you know, this will not end well if we stay. You know, but okay, fine. You're tired. I get it. And then the other reason that it's actually quite like a lot of like a lot of films, you know, will allude to Westerns. That happens a lot, you know, in Kill Bill, like Tarantino does it all the time. But I think it's particularly clever this time because the comic book genre is currently in its classical phase.
Okay.
The past 15 years, just as the 50s were for Westerns, the last 15 years have been...
I see what you mean, yeah.
Right. And
this is the genre of the moment.
Absolutely. And we've reached that point where, you know, we see the tropes over and over again. We see the formulas, like... and so with movies like, arguably this one, but definitely Deadpool, you know, we're moving into the Baroque era. So,
okay.
Like, we've definitely... I'd say the refined era began with Dark Knight. And maybe, like, for sure Iron Man, where they start, you know, pushing it to make it more topical, more like, you know, delving into issues and whatnot. But this definitely...
man,
I'm not saying I like Dark Knight.
I can't meet you there.
I don't care for Dark Knight. I do actually prefer a movie like this that just kind of alludes to social issues and then keeps moving, that keeps it about the personal story.
It's the integration. Like this, to me,
I felt like Dark Knight like beat us over the head with like, look how important this message is. And I'm like, thank you, Morgan Freeman. I didn't need you to spell that out for me.
Right. And I think, that, you know, as Disney has like completely commodified the superhero genre and Iron Man and all the rest of them, it's like, oh, look, now we're making a big point about diversity. Like, I think we're saying the same thing. Like it's like, now we're going to tell you that it's okay for Black people to be superheroes too. And you're like...
Thanks, Disney.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And whereas, like, to me, the whole underlying belief system, like the whole world building of the X-Men world is about do you believe that people are ultimately accepting and tolerant of difference, or do you not? And every plot line, like everything about the story comes from that foundation. And so I love there was like, it was a subtle point to me. It was a subtle point about the corn and the corn syrup, and then GMOs. I'm like, they're genetically modified, like mutant plants, right? Like, you kind of have to make the connection of believing in a mutant world. Like, you have to see the world as mutants already to see the point they're making, like, about GMOs and the alteration of the food supply. Like, but it's embedded in the whole theme of, again, mutant genetics. You don't have to spell it out because it's so part of the X-Men universe, which is what I really like about it. And I think for this one, again, you don't necessarily need to have these really fully drawn three-dimensional villains, because the movie is really about the villainy within. Like, it kind of it closes on the lines from Shane about, like, once you're a killer, and that follows you for life. Like, you can try to tell yourself you're the good guy, but you've shed blood, and what does that mean? And you just don't see people grapple with those kind of issues in other superhero films. I feel like it's easy, like, well, I killed a bad guy. But the bad guys aren't so easily delineated, and usually in the X-Men universe.
Usually, you're right. Absolutely. This one definitely had some pretty two-dimensional
It did.
guys in it. Yeah.
But at the same time, even if you can see them as two-dimensional, they're at once responsible for wiping out
Mutanthood.
But then they recreate the next generation. So I guess.
But as things, right? I do want to say the sequence on the iPhone footage that a nurse takes of the kids that are being raised in this laboratory, I thought was super effective. Like, I found it very disturbing, to watch these children being abused. Like, there's a couple of, disturbing scenes in it. And I thought that was a really thoughtful and authentic way of...
It looked like iPhone footage.
Absolutely.
As like a moviegoer, I was like, oh, this is kind of grainy, but it's not super terrible. So I was like, oh, good job, you. It looked like iPhone footage.
Yeah. But then she follows it with, if you are watching this, it means I am dead.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, God.
Yeah.
Come on.
Very cliche. No yucky love stuff, though.
No yucky love stuff, for once. Yeah.
What did you think? Okay, so we have to sort of tackle the gore question.
Oh!
This was
totally
gorier. Like, this was realism, a more realistic version of violence, again, than you normally see in a superhero movie.
Yeah. This was, and it's...
Podcast listeners, Stacy is grinning in glee about gore. I cannot wait to hear what comes out of her mouth now.
Okay, so let me just tell you about my experience of viewing this movie. I had just prior rented, I think the same one you did, The Wolverine.
Right.
Where he goes to Japan, hooks up with some Japanese chicks, fights some ninjas. It's all good fun.
Let me just say, hooks up with the wrong Japanese chick.
I know.
Me and my friend who watched it were like, okay, one of them had personality and one of them was pretty. You suck.
Thank you. Thank you. Typical.
You suck.
Right. But even in the hookup scenes, like, she's dressed in full tank top, and he doesn't say but one F word the whole time, the entire movie. Like, even when he says, like, the English word for shiza, he's like, it's shocking because you're like, oh my God, like, he just called someone a piece of whatever. Yeah. And I realized, like, watching that movie, how prudish the Wolverine movies are. Like,
yeah, especially for the character.
Thank you, for everything it's supposed to be about. So going into Logan, in the first 4 minutes, he's dropped 5 F-bombs and he has stabbed 4 cholos in the face. And that's just to begin. That's just to kick us off. And it just continues from there. It is, from what I understand, the first rated R
It
X-Men
is.
movie.
It is. I'm going to get into that a little bit more as we transition, but it was quite gory. It wasn't gore for gore's sake. And I will say I felt like so I'm not a huge fan of super violent movies generally. I agree with you. This is a movie that is about the horrors of killing and the depths of what it really means to be violent. So not sort of glossing it over and making it very gory, I felt very much gelled with the theme of the movie. So I actually was like, no, this is what this is supposed to be. It's supposed to it's supposed to show the horrors of killing. It's not shying away from the fact that this is horrifying. Having said that, the person doing all of these horrifying things was not remotely old enough to go into a theater and watch it. And I was uncomfortable and somewhat disturbed by how graphic the movie was, featuring, I looked it up, an 11-year-old girl.
Did that bother you, really?
Yeah, it really...
I loved it.
Okay, it bothered me. I
like when I was 7, I was a Ninja Turtle fan, and I would go around pretending I was Donatello, like slicing people up. Like that would, if I was 11, I would have loved this movie. I'm not saying don't bring your 11-year-old to this movie. That's not at all what I'm saying. But as far as I can't relate to that.
Okay, I found it upsetting that, you know, you would have someone who's so young, who's so clearly, like, again, it is R-rated, and to have a little kid do all these violent things, carry a human head seemed... She's laughing. I'm upset and she's laughing. Oh my goodness.
I enjoyed this movie so much. Every single scene I just loved. I loved watching her tear up people. Like and she has knives in her feet that Logan doesn't even have. And she's more of an acrobat than he is. She's very nimble, so she basically like flies around like a spider monkey, just like tearing people up to pieces.
Yeah, I did like the fact that that Professor X points out that the improved version of him is a female, because the woman would have the feet claws.
Both offensive and defensive.
Well, it's better that you're a girl. And I will say this, on the sort of children thing, I was wrong about this, but I'm sad that I was. I thought Richter, the kid,
like the leader.
who's the leader,
yeah.
Because he lifts up that truck at the end. I was like, oh, he's Magneto's kid. He's not. That's not. His superpower isn't Magneto's superpower. And then I was like, actually it makes sense how they have gotten, like, the bad guys would never have given over their genetic material.
That's a great point.
But, so that was a little disappointing, because I'm like, oh, that'd have been such a perfect ending if the new leader is Magneto's kid.
Oh, yeah.
But that isn't how that played out. So...
Oh, I do want to just jump off from what you said about the horrors of violence. That definitely calls back to Westerns, because in Westerns there's a well-used trope is the cowboy that just wants to retire.
Right.
Like Wolverine, Logan wants to do, just get that Sunseeker boat and just go out literally out into the sunset, right? And disappear. And they're always pulled back in for like one last gig that winds up ending them. But again, it's what you said about them taking on the violent responsibilities so that other people don't have to like take on those horrors of killing.
Right. And for better or for worse. And so one of the things I double check, like I understand that the different studios owning the different rights.
Who owns X-Men?
Fox owns X-Men and Deadpool. Warner Brothers owns all the DC people. So Batman, Superman, and then Disney owns everybody else, Marvel. But so I checked with a friend and was like, double check me on my comic book knowledge, because I'm pretty sure I have this right. Wasn't Wolverine an Avenger?
What?
Because he's a Marvel character.
What?
And I was like, and they can't make him an Avenger because Fox isn't going to let them have the character, right? And he's like, oh yeah, no, that's true. Like there's crossover of X-Men into the rest of the universe that you don't see because they're owned by different studios.
Wow. But
I do feel like, you know, the Disney ones make very violent movies, and I don't feel like anybody really comes to terms with that violence in any real way. And so I was very happy to see a movie that sort of contends with the moral universe of killing. And you know, again, you have the humble farmer and they have eminent domain in there. They have crossing borders in there. She's Latina.
Driverless semi tractor trailers.
Yeah, and corporate control. There's a lot.
Tigers are extinct, everybody, in 2029.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, the Boyd Holbrook says it at the beginning. He makes the joke about Wolverine like leaving all those decapitated de-appendage guys by the side of the road. He goes, they figure it was either Freddy Krueger or tigers, and it can't be one because he's fictional, and it can't be other because they're extinct.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say this, I was reading an article from, with an interview with the director, which in the beginning I was like, really, cholos look exactly the same in 2029 as they do now. Like,
they wouldn't have changed their styles
even a little bit. But actually, the director said, you know, okay, everyone makes movies in the future and the future looks so totally different. And then when the future gets there, you're like, oh, we don't actually have flying cars yet. You know, the Back to the Future syndrome. So he's like, he said he intentionally made it not that different. Like,
I noticed that.
He was like, no, because it's like people think it's going to look so totally. And he's like, and it doesn't happen that way. So I was like, oh, well, fair enough. That was
12 years. Yeah. I loved all the like music they made up for it that sounded kind of like it would come out a few years from now.
You know, the car looks a little bit more futuristic. Not super. I was like, fair enough. So there are a few like, you know, what does the future look like? Our food supply is poisoned. We're eating corn syrup. We're creating mutants in Mexico.
They can get asylum in Canada, but not in the U.S.
Yeah.
Which I kind of went, no, that's probably likely, yeah.
Yeah, definitely very negative U.S. focus. Yeah, driverless semi-trucks. So I definitely felt like the movie set us up for saying there's different kind of hero that needs to happen. Like the kids represent a different way of thinking about the X-Men. And, you know, and sort of mentorship and family relationships and all that stuff is in the movie, but ultimately the kids are left without an adult.
Mm-hmm. They have to kind of do it on their own.
It's not, he doesn't, I honestly thought he was going to go with them. Like, I was particularly in the ending of that, he was going to make it to Canada with them, and which is stupid because he was clearly going to die. I get it. Sorry, everyone. I have a way of believing in the ending that I want to happen sometimes when everything is pointing in the other direction. Yeah. And, you know, he's going to like reset up, you know, the school and whatever now that Professor X is done. Yeah. But it's like the kids are on their own. Like they don't have any guiding principle. And so it's a very grim view of the future, but not completely bleak.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think like Magneto was right, but at the same time, there were those nurses, you know, that risked and ultimately some gave their lives to help these kids get a chance to start over. So, you know, maybe while Charles may be naive, he's not completely wrong. Like,
no, and there's the doctor who's like so excited to see Mutant. And they're, you know, fans of X-Men. Actually, the bad guy even is like, oh, I'm so excited to meet you. Like,
I loved the meta stuff. I loved Wolverine like pulling out the comic books from the nurse's bag and going, what the hell? And the kid who is actually holding a Wolverine doll at the end. I really enjoy it. I've never read a comic book. I'm not, I can't really count myself as a fan, so I don't know how that community reacted, but I loved it. I loved him, you know, Logan saying, like, this is ice cream for bedwetters. That's a terrible line. It's like terribly written, but like I love the sentiment of it. Like, this is all bullcrap. A quarter of it happened, and they made up the rest. And this is like in real life, people die.
Yeah,
and just like kind of throwing it on the bed. And, like, just trash.
Yeah, I think that was a larger commentary about the way superhero movies are made, of saying like in real life it's messy and it's dark, and you don't just get to kill a bunch of people and walk off like you're still amazing.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't compromise you morally or eat into your soul.
And it didn't end with a giant apocalyptic maelstrom like so many of them do. you know, like, oh, the world's at stake, and the world is going to be eaten up by this big giant thing coming from the sky right now, unless one of us flies a nuke into it or whatever. It was
It was a personal story.
Thank you, on the ground dealing with their problems.
Yeah, and I did think. Sorry. So I was gonna say, for everyone whose Spanish is not up to snuff. It was.
Thank you. Yeah.
It, you know, I'm sure you can look up a full translation, but I thought it was really funny when he asks her why she doesn't talk in the beginning. She's like, all you did was yell. Like, you were just yelling all the time, and I couldn't. And she was like, it was better not to talk. And I was like, that was hilarious.
And his reaction,
cracked
me up. He basically is like, stop talking.
Exactly. But like, they give no subtitles, so like you don't know what she's saying, and she's basically saying like, you were just yelling constantly and I couldn't deal. And I'm like, that was awesome. That was really funny.
I love that scene. I love everything about it. I loved any of the scenes that took place inside the car with the three of them like yelling at each other or complaining or griping or whatever. It was so beautiful. I just loved it. I love seeing that like Laura and Logan were like the same person. They really were so similar. It was like watching Logan yell at himself.
They were, yeah. I yes. And yet again, like, their similarities don't forge this bond, which I really like. Like, he doesn't see himself in her and love her because of it. It's almost the opposite. Like, he sees himself in her as this killing machine, and he's like, don't go down this path. Like,
okay, let me give you a counterpoint.
Okay, go for it.
He does not give 2 cents about her until he realizes she's like him. And
okay.
You see it, like, he just thinks she's this girl, like, she's a liability. I don't know what's going on, but, like, these guys are after me. Let's leave her in the warehouse, right, and get the hell out of here. Until she comes out with the claws. And that's when he starts actually fighting for her. Like, literally fighting for her. Like, he starts cutting people up. And from then on, I think he is pushing her away because he cares about her. And he can't stand to lose one more person. He's like, and he says, like, people I care about die.
Yes, I agree. I think, again, we're sort of saying the same thing. Like, he is very much, you're right, he is pushing her away, but a very vulnerable, soft person would have cut, like, in all previous instances, a weaker person sort of cuts through his armor, and he is so much less able to push someone away. But because she's so like him, and he sees her as strong and capable, like, he's able to keep his defenses against her.
Interesting.
Much more than he's like, oh, I have to take care of this person. She's weak, or he's weak and vulnerable, and I'm the strong one, and I have to be the strong one. He's like, she's pretty badass. Like, she's got her stuff going on. Like,
take care of yourself.
I got the old frail man. That's my number one priority.
That's a great point. Yeah. And I found all those scenes so touching between him and Charles. Like, every single one, even where they were just, like, yelling at each other.
Yeah, I didn't, but that's fair. Because I've never liked Professor X, because I've always, again, I'm solidly Team Magneto. I always thought he was wrong. Like, I'm not a big fan of his. And I was like, look at all the harm and destruction that you're creating by fixating on this belief that is not so. Like, you got this entire lovely family in Oklahoma killed for no reason.
For nothing.
Other than you wouldn't let go.
You were tired.
No, and he's like, I just wanted you to see what a real family was like. And I was like, that was worth them all dying? Like,
right.
You know, it's funny to me because I feel like this movie very much condones the opposite view. Like, it doesn't come down on the side of the X-Men. Having said that, I was very moved when she tilts the cross.
Yeah, were you?
I was. You weren't?
I got more of the goosebumps when she took his hand. At the prior ceremony. How do we want to be careful about spoilers? I mean, it's kind of like
that ship sailed 8 podcasts.
Okay. Yeah. So when she
we were careful in the beginning. We're over it now.
Thank you. Spoiler alert for all future episodes.
Yeah, like, if you didn't see the movie, don't listen to this podcast.
There you go. Yeah, watch it first. It's required reading. Yeah, when she takes his hand when he's trying to give his own little his own like sad attempt at a eulogy for Professor X. He just can't even get anything out. He takes his wrist. I was like, oh, so sad. And then he goes and like beats up the truck.
Yeah.
Which cracked
He has
me
some
up.
real anger management issues.
He doesn't know how to deal with this. He
Yeah,
cannot
like,
feel his feelings.
Very little coping skills.
Yeah.
Which is, again, why I've never liked that character. I usually am a sucker for a bad boy, but Wolverine never didn't
hit home.
pull on me.
Yeah.
So
I do wonder. I feel like, and again, maybe it's just my lack of literacy in comic books, but I feel like we're never told why he can't handle his feelings or talk about anything or process anything that happens to him.
yeah, I'm not in canon.
You know, like I feel like
know.
even in the quote unquote origins movie, I feel like it was just like we show up and he's there being Wolverine and that's who he is, and it's like, well, how did he, like, I thought this was an origins movie. How did he get this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent.
But I guess you never know about the John Wayne character. You never know where they're coming from.
Well, I think a lot of times, at least in this universe, it's because they're mutants, right? And they're always fearing the rejection, and so they always feel pressure to hide who they are and what they can do because other people won't like them. You know, like they will be rejected or worse, like persecuted for who they are, and so they learn not to have attachments because they can't ever really be themselves.
That makes sense. Why is it important that Professor X kills all the X-Men?
Does he?
Yes.
I totally missed that. I couldn't figure out where they all went.
It's very easy to miss. I had to look it up.
I assume they all died of not natural causes, but they all died like in various battles.
No.
He kills them with his
seizures? With one of his seizures. He kills everybody except for Logan. Because Logan's got his healing powers or whatever and manages to get through it. So that's why they keep referring to the Westchester incident.
Oh, is that what the Westchester incident is?
Right. Or when Boyd Holbrook says, like, oh, like, it's a shame what happened out east last year. And that's why, you know, Logan has him out in the middle of the desert in Mexico.
No, I get that I thought he was protecting from people, like regular humans, not from mutants.
Probably both. Yeah.
That flew over my head. I missed that.
Yeah. It's apparently he just took out like 300 people, including all of their like community.
Yeah, I mean, again, all I can say is, like, this movie comes down solidly against the X-Men. Like, for an X-Men movie, it's like, you were wrong. This is never going to work.
This did not work out for you.
And I guess I feel like, that is the worst message you could be... Even though I totally agree with that point of view, I'm going to...
You don't want to, right? You want to be wrong.
I love... Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of Logan, like... The sort of self-hatred, like, I love idealists. I love romantics. Like, I love people who think, who dream big and believe in the faith of humanity. Like, I don't want to be cynical and right. I want to be cynical and wrong, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's very hard in Trump America not to feel like we are so divided.
I just realized that earlier I neglected to mention when I was listing off reasons that people like Wolverine that I kind of left out the part about swords shooting out from his knuckles, which is, you know, seems pretty key. So there's that.
There is that. Fair enough. I find, not one of... I feel like the instantaneous healing is definitely a very cool superpower and one I wish I had, but... I don't know if I really want swords to shoot out from my knuckles, but I could see how that could be appealing to somebody else.
Right. I definitely think it's more fun to watch than to have the swords thing.
Fair enough.
That could definitely become an issue.
Okay. Well, on that note, do you have any recommendations for the week?
Sure. I'd like to recommend, talking about Baroque era comic books. The only graphic novel I've ever read was Watchmen.
Mm-hmm. I'm big Neil Gaiman fan. Oh no, he's Sandman. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Watchmen is like Alan Moore and some other guy that was actually did the art. But
Okay.
And this is not the movie, just to be clear, the book, not the movie, Watchmen. It'll blow your brains out.
Very cool. I am going to recommend the book, The Girl with All the Gifts. If you're into the whole child soldier thing, this is a good one about, it's a good sci-fi read, and brings up some good issues about children and humanity.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. If you did, you have so many ways to contact us. Check us out at our website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com, where all our social links are. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. You can leave a review, which I will mention at the break at the end of the episode. We love to hear from you, so please reach out.
Yes,
and remember,
please.
Movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time. Hello, Movies That Matter fans. If you leave us a review on iTunes and include a recommendation, we'll declare you our Over-Analyst of the Week and read your recommendation in the next episode at the end of the show. iTunes reviews really help us out and make it possible for new listeners to discover the podcast. It only takes a minute and it's totally free to do. So thanks for your help.